What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we are back. We're going back to Samaria. We're going back to the Hyperion Age. We're talking more Conan. And I've got someone else on the journey with me today from the, Comics in Motion Collective, I think was the best way to describe us all. I have Maff from many appearances. How you doing? You okay?
Not too bad. Thank you for having me.
That's right. Glad to join us. So today we're talking... really, I suppose it's sort of like the first Conan story that was published, the Phoenix and the Sword, and which we will get into. But before we get to that, let's talk Conan in general. How did you first come across Conan? As a kid or teenager, in the books, the movies. What's your origin story for Conan?
Well, I was born 1978, so kind of 80s, typical. Your babysitter was the action films, was
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, things like, I used to go to my uncle's where when my parents were working. I'd go down there and me and my cousin were about the same age, but he had older brothers who introduced us to all these, films like Commando, Conan, things like that. And it was just like, wow. Even the classics like Beastmaster
Yeah.
and that, but that sword and sorcery kind of thing. And it would just, I mean, every now and again, as a young kid, you get to see a bit of a booby,
Yeah.
fantastic, and that. But it was just the action and kind of obviously we shouldn't have been watching it,
Mm.
but it would just, 80s kids, who really cares?
Hasn't damaged us at all in any way, but
No, I want to say, I mean, I've only killed a few people. It's fine, but it. I think, I think it probably would have been worse trying to hide us away from it because we would have
Mm.
probably tried to push to see it more and that. And I think, my uncle, I don't think he was that bothered. If anything, at the time, he were like, "Oh, we've just got this, we've got Cobra or something like that," and he'd be like,
Cobra. Yeah,
you'd sit down and back then it was just pure action,
yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
Apparently there was a story in there somewhere, but you just didn't
That
care.
that wasn't the point of what you were
No,
watching. No.
you wanted the cheesy one-liners, you wanted the over-the-top action, and that's what it was, And Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, I don't think I'd seen Conan first. Actually, I think I might have seen Predator or
Mm.
or even Commando, one of them before, and then we got introduced to Conan, and it's like, wow, he's
Yeah.
just like
A
he's a
tank.
monster.
Yeah.
It's questionable, this young slave who's pushing the wheel of pain around it, all of a sudden turns into this brute of a man
Yeah.
and that, but it didn't matter. He didn't care and that, and it just, I was into Dungeons and Dragons,
Mm.
things like that. I still am now. I still play D&D, and it was a high fantasy thing, and I was drawn into it. I just wanted more and more and that, and I just loved it.
Yeah. No, that first film, I've got to say, like that first film, I think it's been like a big introduction thing for like a lot of people. Um, and I thought, because I'm the same, I think the Conan the Barbarian, the film was probably one of my first things, and then later on from there, you sort of like you pick up bits and pieces. But Arnold Schwarzenegger, like it's 1982, it's his first big film role, and that just there's just that sort of it's a film because I say it's an odd film in itself because he doesn't really get introduced as Conan until about like probably about 15 minutes
Yeah,
into it.
yeah. Because
Um,
it's the tragedy of him losing his family, and it's
mm,
just a kid, and it's a build up, and then as I say, you just introduced these hulking shoulders pushing this. I don't know what that wheel actually did.
It clearly is something. It was, yeah, 'cause it's like a miller's wheel, isn't it? Like a
Yeah,
huge, the wheel of pain. Yeah.
and that, but yeah, you got introduced to it, and then it's what is it now? They kind of ask him what it is, and he's like, fight, eat,
Mm.
take the women, and that kind of thing. You're like, right. I mean, it was perfect for Arnold Schwarzenegger because the dialogue, there wasn't a lot there for him to do. And they knew that he just had to look the part, which he did.
Yeah.
And that,
Well, I think he was with that film, like, John Milius, who directed it and stuff. They say it's that sort of like what is good in life. It's like, the lamentation of my enemies and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
It's very macho, very sort of thing. But like Arnie just looks like a Frank Franzetta Pete. Like the whole thing, it's just like a chiseled body wielding this sword. And it was, I think, as you're right, we sort of mentioned this idea of like we were just talking about off air, but we were talking about sort of 80s action, then this idea of like action figures. And as a kid, to me, Arnie was that. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger was like, oh, he's like an action figure. Like that's
yeah.
not that's not a human. That's an action figure. Like
But it was him or Stallone, really, wasn't it? They
yeah,
they were the kind of I mean, Arnie was so much bigger. I mean, there was, I can't remember the other guy who was like nearly 7 foot, who was in it, who kind of dwarfs Arnold Schwarzenegger when he stands next to him.
his.
But
His what's it? Then I don't know.
I'm gonna have to
Thorenson.
look it up now. Yeah,
His bodybuilding mate. Yeah,
and that, but it was just like it was like you took one of these Greek gods and you chiseled him from marble, and this is what you've got. And you looked at it and you thought, wow,
yeah.
someone's obviously taking their vitamins. But
Said their prayers and yeah.
it's like, how do I become that? That's the ultimate action figure. That's what you want to
Mm,
be. Like we were saying off air, nowadays it's a completely different thing. It is more of a, like we were just saying about nobody. Um,
mm.
I think now you want it to be a normal looking guy. All right, John Wick's a normal looking guy to a certain degree, and that he's a bit more believable in one sense. Whereas, you look at Arnie, you just think, yeah, I'm never going to
Yeah.
be that,
No.
but I could dream.
Yeah. But it becomes a sort of like I say, it's aspirational stuff in that sort of like the physique. But I think his like representation of Conan as well, in that like you say about high fantasy, and I'm not a huge fantasy guy. Like I have my pockets of fantasy, like I'm a huge Terry Pratchett fan. I've read Conan, I've read Lord of the Rings, and bits and pieces. But to compare it to say like Lord of the Rings, which is um much more plot driven, it's much more complex, it's that sort of thing. It's sort of like they are worlds apart, but very sort of there are elements that sort of
Mhm.
um similar. And when I go back and watch Conan and Conan the Destroyer, which I'll defend Conan the Destroyer as well for, but you have that pulpy feel from it. You get that thing of like we're not looking to be highbrow. We're looking to be like the music is like the what's it called the March of Steel or sort of
Yeah.
the main theme. And let's say Arnie being this sort of brooding character and all the stuff that goes on in it. It's not sort of like that kind. It's not Legend or it's not sort of like Lord of the Rings or one of those other fantasy films. Like this is very much like this is a pulpy, kick your ass kind of high fantasy adventure, and it's um
This is it's like taking Tolkien, but it's when I play D&D, that there's the moments when you get to have a battle and you get to roll your dice and do that,
mm,
which is all fun, but a big part of it is kind of the storytelling and the kind of interaction that you have. That's what Tolkien does. Sometimes
mm,
he overdoes bits. You
yeah,
can have a full chapter of Gandalf turning from grey to white, and it's
yeah,
like, come on, get on with it.
yeah,
But then you then get Conan, and it's like, there's a sprinkle of story there, but we don't care about that because we just want to get to the next battle. We want
mm,
to get to the next kind of big scene, and that because that's what people are here for. You know, yeah, we'll add a bit of dialogue in here and that make people kind of aware of who the characters are and little hooks there, but this is about action. This is
Mm.
about the epitome of, that manly man, and it, I'd not read these books, and going into these books was I got something different to what I expected, what I saw on screen.
Mm.
So it was like, oh, okay. But it's an interesting thing. I think they've just toned it all down and just gone, right, let's just give the audience what they want. And what they
Yeah.
want is to see the sword, the fighting, the muscles, the blood, the guts. That's what they want. They're not here for a big story.
No, I think you're right. That's a really good point. They boiled it down to it's a visual medium, isn't it? Like people are
Mhm.
there to see the visuals, and I think if you're going to sell Conan on screen, you're looking for a certain part of the Conan mythos, and you're right. You want the sort of the battles, the swinging swords, and the heads being lopped off, and all that kind of stuff. That's what you're looking for. But you're right. The stories in particular are quite well, not all of them, because some of them are very much like the film. But the one we'll get into sort of we'll slide into a little bit into the Phoenix and the Sword because this is quite a different thing. For the first two thirds, the second third, the last bit is the third finale is kind of what I would expect. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
I, I've cheated. I bought the compilation, so I've got I think about 17 of his books, and obviously I read this. Is this the first story that he actually did?
It's the first one that's published. Yeah,
Because I wasn't sure. I was reading it and kind of thinking, right, okay. If I'd have picked this up without really knowing
yeah.
much about it, I'd have been like, I'm not sure if this is for me.
Yeah.
And that, going back, I say I bought it and then I bought it on Audible and listened to it again this morning just to kind of refresh my mind. Um, Trying to read with a 5-year-old around you, it's not the easiest thing to do.
No,
You know,
no.
I felt that first chapter were like several chapters and it just dragged and that. But then, so it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the film
Mm,
kind of, But again, like we said, the film is just like we're not doing story. We're just doing action. We're just doing the stuff that we know. We're going to cherry pick and we know what you're going to
yeah,
like.
exactly. I think it works. You're right about this being an odd choice. I mean, one of the things that like Howard, when he was after, like before he died, he sort of said that these films, the stories are almost to be told as if like there's an old man telling these stories and he's sort of recounting different tales, and it almost feels like the story is coming from the character in this story. Like, this is older Conan. Is King. This story features King Conan. He has taken over the throne of Aquilonia. Um, for a period of time. You're not sure exactly how long. It hasn't been too long, but it's not been like yesterday. He's been there. He's been a king for a while. Um, and he is as an older guy, he's sort of middle aged, but he's still, very vital. Um, but it's
Well, I
interesting to
think,
sort of like to start your publication and go, well, I want to tell the adventures of this barbarian. I'm going to start with his retirement.
well, that's what threw me.
Mm.
'Cause it's like I started reading it and I kind of went back and looked at your list and I thought, is this and I was Googling it and saying, is this the first book? Yes, it is. Right, so we've got Conan at the end of his life, well, kind of, the tail end of his life here, and it's, it's like you've walked into a pub and it says, "I'm going to tell you a tale,"
Yeah,
which it works, but it's not what I expected, and I think maybe it's spoiled because I do know of, Conan the Destroyer, Red
mm.
Sonja, things like that. Even Terry Pratchett's Cohen, and that it knowing them kind of maybe spoiled me for the book.
Mm.
And that's why I was a bit kind of oh
Yeah, it's an interesting
and
one to start with, isn't it? I
yeah
mean, one of the things I googled after reading this because I've dipped in. I've got the compilation as well. I've got a big the complete the complete Conan book, which I think is great. And I've dipped into this all over the place. Like I was like, I don't really want to read it in order. They're not serialized, so they don't really matter in that way. They're individual stories. So I've dipped in, I've read this and read that. I've really Googled exactly that sort of thing. Where's the best place to start? Like, if I'm new to Conan, what's the best place to start?
Hmm.
And pretty much universally, everyone was like, don't start with the first stories. Because
Right.
you're like, oh, okay. And so, on the last episode, we talked about the elephant and the tower, the
Hmm.
elephant of the tower. And that's a young Conan. And that came like several years later
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
telling, and you're like, okay, cool.
I mean, the payoff in the book is worth it.
Mm-mm.
It's just, as I say, it's like, is it expedition? The kind of there's a big setup,
Yeah,
but the problem is, if you didn't know who the character was, you'd be like, why am I bothered about you trying to assassinate the king? It, it,
that's
it's hard to kind of grasp.
yeah. It's
And
interesting,
that,
and I think because it's we come in with baggage to this
mm,
story. As you say, like the movie Conan and the comics and those Frank Frazetta sort of like art stylings of him draped in women and fighting dragons and all this other stuff. Like, so you're like, yeah, Conan's a badass. Like, this is what I'm expecting. So you come in knowing that to an extent. If you knew nothing and you read this first part of this book, which people would have done, I mean, there's actually but pre this, there is a poem that he wrote called Samaria,
mm,
which is about the sort of thing. And then he wrote this essay about the Hyperion Age, which is kind of fascinating. But like you said, the whole first chapter is a bunch of politicians and mercenaries not debating, planning to kill the king that they see has taken over their kingdom, Aquilonia. And you know it's Conan, but if you don't know who Conan is, like you're reading it and going, okay,
yeah,
why should I, like you said, why should I care? Is it good? Is it bad?
well, and the thing is as well, I think it's like they throw about well, one, two, three, about five or six names at you, as if you
Oof.
should know who they are.
Yeah.
It's Ronaldo the Bard, and Thorpe and is it Ashalante?
Asasanta, yeah. They're
Ash,
not even they're not even easy names to read,
yeah,
which
I mean, I'm dyslexic, and I'm glad I listened to it this
yeah.
morning. And I'm still going to butcher the names at times. I, I mean, there's things in there that I think I, I'm assuming it took kind of from North mythology because like
Mm. He
well you've got
talks,
Set, which is Egypt, but then you've the mention about Valhalla and things like that.
yeah.
But there's a lot of names thrown at you, and you're like, okay, who are they?
Yeah.
Are they important? Uh, is it Prosperous? Conan's right hand
Prospero.
man,
Yeah,
Prospero,
Prospero is his friend. Yeah.
and it's like he's briefly mentioned. He's spoken. Well, you kind of meet him near the end of the book, but he's not really a main figure to it. So it's like again, it's more names that you've thrown in there, and it's like I, I think you've overdone it,
Yeah.
and that you know when you get to the end of the story, you can kind of see where they all fit in. But I just reading it, and again, I am reading it to kind of critique it and kind of
Mm.
review. So you've kind of got a different view of things. But it's interesting to kind of go on there and think, right, okay, so you're giving me a lot of information here, and I'm not quite sure what I'm meant to really do with it.
Yeah.
And then you get into the next chapter, and you're like, okay, so you've lost your ring. Okay, I see you're a little bit upset about that, right? I've seen The Hobbit. I've read The Hobbit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, this would have been before The Hobbit when he wrote it, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. But
Yeah, yeah.
lost in high fan like in fantasy, like lost jewelry is not uncommon for
Do you want
centuries.
a cursed item?
Yeah,
Here we go.
exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, but having getting to the end of it, I kind of I see the path and I see what he's done, and I'm interested to read the next ones. But I do think the first couple of chapters, it's like pulling teeth a little bit, and it's like, if I had a few books that I was
Mm.
reading and I picked it up and I thought I'll give it a couple of chapters, see how it go. By the time I got to the third chapter, I might be thinking, no, I'll put that down and I'll pick something else up, which
Yeah.
is a shame because I think it does pay off.
Mm.
Just again, a bit like Tolkien at times. Why have you put that chapter in there? Because it's basically it's been, 3 or 4, 4 or 5 pages and nothing's happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've not
You
really told me anything.
no, and I think and sort of like Howard, Rob E. Howard, author of this is he sort of switches between quite purple sort of like prose. Like all of a sudden, it's like you've used 12 words where two would have done, and then to the next one where it's sort of like bang, 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 bang. Like it's kind of like he switches and because when it gets to the fight at the end, spoilers, there is a fight. When it gets fight, it does switch up and it does, like you said, it
Yeah.
sort of pays off. But the route there is kind of winding.
I wonder then actually, because I'm dyslexic, so spelling is a really bad. Reading, I'm fine. I do end up reading things a couple of times just so I can kind of get me. Comics, I'm really good with comics because
Mm,
comics are a bit all over the place, and it suits my brain. My brain can kind of take that in, and I'm fine with it. With books, when it's like line after line after line, I sometimes have to go back and reread what I've read. And then, as I say, I cheated by listening to audio, and I actually got a bit more out of it this morning.
mm.
Um,
Oh, I just when it's there. I think it's cheating. I've listened to loads of Audible and I love it. So I think it can give you a whole different experience and stuff, and or it can clarify things because you
yeah,
say about names, yeah. There's things that I've been reading for years, and then you hear someone else say it, and you're like, oh, I've sounded like a bit of a tit in conversations where I've said things completely wrong. Okay,
yeah,
right, fair
yeah. The
enough.
amount of times that you think, oh yeah, I know what that is, and you
Yeah,
you read it out, and it's like, no. But I know when I used, at school and I was writing things, if there was a word I couldn't spell, instead of, I mean, someone would just say, "We'll go get a dictionary." Well, that's fantastic. I can't do that because my brain won't,
mm,
don't work like that. So I don't know how to spell it to start with.
yeah,
Dictionary's
yeah.
not really going to help me
That's
an
it. Yeah,
awful
forget
lot.
about it. I can't find it. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
But when I would write stuff, sometimes I would ramble a bit to try write, another 10 words to avoid that one word that I wanted to use. And 9 times out of 10, you would come back and you'd still need to use that word. You've just added an extra line in there. So I
Mm,
wonder if, in a way, that's kind of one of the things he's done here, where maybe he was a bit dyslexic himself and didn't realize. And, I suppose back then it wasn't really as much of a known thing. As I say, I grew up in the 80s and I was just stupid.
yeah,
You know, it's like just spell it, just learn it. It's like, yeah, but I can't. I don't understand why I can't do this, but
yeah.
yeah,
No,
and
it'd be interesting because I say he was what this was 32 and he was in his sort of late 20s, maybe I think when he was writing these into his 30s.
yeah,
So yeah, I don't know, like when you think like if he was coming up in the 1910s and 1920s, I can imagine sort of like, and if writing was his out, but like yeah, that no one's looking and saying you're struggling with that. Would you like some help? They're probably just hitting him with a cane and
yeah.
cracking on. Yeah,
Just learn to spell it. Okay,
yeah,
but that's fantastic. Tell me to learn to fly. I still can't do it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and there is elements where you do sort of read a paragraph or two, and you are thinking like you've said words there, but you've not told. It's weird because he'll do like a paragraph, and I'm sort of like, you haven't told me a great deal in that paragraph. It sounds nice, but it's not told me enough. And then
Yeah,
the next one is like incredibly dense of information, and it's kind of like, here's all this information about this room and this corridor and this thing, and you're like,
this is what
oh,
you were trying to say in that previous paragraph,
almost like
and
yeah,
ultimately it's just all kind of spilled out all at once. And I mean, as I said, I did find when I was reading this to start with, I had to be on my own, quiet, concentrating on what we're doing because it is them things of information dumps every now and again, and it's like, oof, there's a lot there to take in. I just need a moment just to process who everybody is and that, as I started making my notes and writing things down because I'm thinking, right, I'm gonna have to try and remember who they are because that must be important. And as
Mm,
it turns out, one or two of them isn't, and
yeah.
that. But I suppose in a way, as a starting point, maybe it's what he's done is he's introduced a lot of characters
Mm,
and he's got somewhere to go with them. And people might think, all right, Ronaldo, who was he? I wanted to know him. He was a bard. He must have stories. Conan is very much respectful of what Ronaldo. So he must mean something. So again, you know, they can probably explore him in stories further down the line.
yeah.
So it's a clever thing because people will think, I want to know who that is.
I do wonder that actually, because this is the first one, and I did because a lot of people die in this book, but others obviously don't. And you do think there was that thing. I was thinking like, I wonder how Howard saw the future of this. Like, was he exactly as you say and be like, I'm gonna go, is it gonna jump back and forth like he ends up being, or was it like, oh, we're gonna do this in an order, and I've got this idea, and so like you say, he was like stocking up characters that were like, cool, they can come back, and then I
Mhm.
can do this with them. Like, I don't know how much planning or forethought has gone into some of this. Um, because you're right, like some of them are quite compelling, and you're like Prospero, Conan's friend. As they sort of discuss things, and like Conan's obviously taken over from as king of Aquilonia, and Prospero is Aquilonian. Like he's well, no, I think he's from Stygia, but they have this conversation where it's saying like, yeah, but you're better than the last king and this, and he had he's trying to sort of like make Conan feel better about things,
Mhm.
and you see like, oh, so they're friends, cool. What's their history? I don't know. We
But
might
yeah,
come to it. We might come. I'm assuming there's he comes up in another story. I don't know. So yeah, they do sort of stock characters up when you're like, okay, I want to know more of how their relationships built up and stuff. It's not in here.
no. I mean, if someone says to me, I've got a book about Conan, he's a politician, I'll be like, fuck off. Oh,
Yeah.
all right, okay, yeah. But that's kind of what it is, and that's one thing you do get from this. He's you can see that he's bored. He's
Mm,
like, I wanted to be king, but I didn't want to do this. He just
yeah.
wanted to conquer and move on because that's what he's done all his life. He didn't expect to kind of conquer and then get stuck. And
Yeah.
and he's kind of been tied into it, and for whatever reason, he's not moved on. He's not been able to kind of get out of it.
Yeah. And actually, there's a line. I can't find it, but there's a really good line. He says to Prospero, he says that my dreams only went as far as acquiring the crown.
Yeah,
So he was like, yeah, I wanted to come in and I wanted to save the day and be the hero, and I was going to, take the throne. Hadn't really thought beyond that. I didn't know exactly as you say. Didn't know that I was going to be stuck,
yeah, because
drawing maps and politicianing.
yeah,
Being
he
yeah,
says when he takes the crown from the blooded, decapitated head,
yeah,
and he's like, again, tell me that. Tell me you
yeah,
taking the crown. Tell me that story. I want to know that one, not about Conan the politician.
yeah,
Conan you know, well, the only thing that can really kill you is being assassinated. But we've got all these guards around, and you just feel for him. You feel that you know a bit of sorrow for him, thinking that
mm.
he's meant to be this man mountain, and so far at this point, he, he's a big guy who's just withering away.
Yeah, and I like that actually that you said because exactly it is because when we meet him, he's like Conan the choreographer. Oh no, okay, not choreographer, not choreographer, stenographer. He's writing maps.
Mm.
He's basically sort of
A
like
cartographer. Yeah.
cartographer. Thank you. And so he just sat there writing these maps, and he has his conversation. And exactly as you say, he's like stuck. He's bored. But he sees there's a value in what he can do, but he hasn't got like that mentor to or someone to say, no, you're doing the right thing. Like this is
Yeah.
stick with it. This is how you learn. Da, da. And what, as you say, I think is interesting is he talks about these other lands about like beyond Samaria. Like it says that oh, there's Valhalla and Vanaheim and all this other stuff, and they're all he said, into the Norse mythology and stuff. And he talks
Mm.
about them being like, oh, they are like if you think I'm a barbarian and you think I'm hardened, like you don't know anything. Like, I've traveled all these lands and stuff. And I thought that was really cool. And as you say, it sort of alludes to all these adventures and all these things. And as you say, you're kind of like, cool. Can I read them, please? I want to know them. They sound interesting.
Yeah,
Um, and that's all good. But what I do find interesting is this fact of, like you said, he's almost got like itchy feet, hasn't he? He's aching for those days of being the wandering sort of mercenary or the sort of the barbarian.
being alive.
Yes.
It's like he's been, cut off by the knees, and he's just, you know, he, he's been here so long. He's starting to kind of grow roots, and he's planted it. He doesn't know how to get out of this,
Mm.
you
Well,
know.
he's kind of
And
scared. That's it. He's kind of scared that it will plant him roots, won't he? He doesn't want the comfort of it. Like,
I think for me, I think that's what scares him the most.
mm,
He knows the life of the sword, the life of fighting and moving on to the next thing and conquering. And where he is now, he's gone from being this big barbarian to this kind of, to be fair, this meek and mild person who is not. He's out of his comfort zone. He doesn't really know what to do.
yeah,
Like you say, he's twitching and he's wanting something, but even though he's king and he's ruler, he's been told what to do to a certain degree. He's been
yeah,
told,
yeah.
no, no, you can't go to. I can't remember now. I
There's,
don't know.
there's another city basically.
Yeah,
They're going off. There's a whole. The army's off on a march, and at the head of it is one of his generals, and he's like, "Oh, I want to go with them." And he's like, "Well, you can't do that because you're king. Like that's not how this works. Like you now send other people out to do that shit." And you're
but
right. Like, yeah,
it's that
it's.
thing of, I'm sure you do it. If you want something doing, you do it yourself,
Hmm.
and you know
Hmm.
it gets done. And that's what he's thinking. If we're going to conquer a city, the best person to be there is me.
Yeah,
I've done it. Look, I've got a crown on my head. I've done it before. I've
yeah,
probably done it for the last X amount of years. Let me go do it. Well, no, you're too important. And I think
yes,
that's what's killing him.
yeah. What's interesting is though, as it moves on, we've talked about, we've had the sort of the Asante and all his guys talking about assassination of the king. The other thing as well, as you sort of talk about Prospero and Conan talking about this, Prospero actually says like, I don't know why you're so worried, as you sort of said, because the only way would be assassination. We have the Black Dragon, which is sort of like our royal guard, and we've got all the armies, and we've got all the mercenaries on side. They all sort of look up to you, like you're kind of protected. And I think that's the other thing, isn't it? And this is what the story gets to. He likes to be at the hilt of the sword,
Mm.
not having everyone else do it for him. And so to be told, well, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Not just you don't have to go off to this other city, but like literally you are in the safest place here because there's so many soldiers and things around you. He feels blunted, doesn't he? Like he's like, oh,
Yeah, you're
okay,
no longer
fine.
in danger, and it's like, but I've lived my life in danger. That's where I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
If anything, you're probably making me more nervous. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
And that, I mean,
Yeah.
it's that thing of, as you're reading through, it's like he's not the he's not the person you expect him to be, and he has just been kind of stunted away, and it's like you just need to let him loose,
Mm.
and they won't do that. And if anything, that's probably what would kill him off, you know, than actually, a dagger to the side or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? But we are going to get, he is going to get his opportunity. But before we get to that, obviously, all the things that are going on, um, he is, whilst asleep, whether it's a hallucination or a dream, Conan is taken to a place and he walks down this long corridor and he meets this old, um, um, uh,
Epimetheus, I think it's called.
yeah, he's like an old wizard, and all this other stuff. And this is where one thing we should put into context is, this came out in 32. um, Robert E. Howard had close links, or not close links, well, relatively close links with H.P. Lovecraft, another favorite of mine. And so you see it kind of in this section where it
Mm.
sort of references like the shadowy outlines of the nameless old ones and half forgotten gods and all this other stuff that feels very sort of Lovecraftian. Like there's this as he walks down this corridor and stuff, and he meets this guy, and he sort of acts. Oh yeah, yeah, bloody names in this thing. Epimitras, let's call it. Yeah, E for now. Um, he basically says to him, you did go as far as you can, but you're actually Conan keeps referring to himself as a foreigner and says, I'm not of Aquilonian descent. I'm Sumerian. I'm a foreigner in a foreign land. I've become king through sort of violent means, and I think the people are against me. And this Epimetheus says, well, actually, now your future and Aquilonia's future are tied in together. Like you need to survive because you are the best thing for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's like an unspoken prophecy of something is coming or
It,
something's going to happen.
it's like when if you've got a problem, you ask someone else to see it from a different point of view,
Yes.
and that he's that different point of view. He's the one who can kind of say, "You guys have been doing it this way for so long, you're getting it wrong." And now I'm here and I'm gonna, they expect him to come here and juggle things up and get things done right. You know, he's come in, he's slayed the previous king. What he were doing wrong, we don't know, but obviously he's probably got idle and just, I'm guessing, drunk with power,
Mm.
and then at which point he kind of disregards your subjects and that. Whereas Conan's kind of come in and Conan, he seems to be very much kind of you you're one of us, you prove yourself, and that's who you are. Again, I suppose I'm t talking also from other knowledge of Conan as well, but it is very much if you can prove yourself to me, it doesn't matter whether you're someone the same size as him or someone who's, a tiny little person. If you've got worth, then he believes in it
Mm.
and that. And I think that's kind of what he's trying to say is we need you because you're different,
Yes.
because you can
Yeah.
see where we've gone wrong.
Or you
And that.
provide an alternative future. Like you are different. You are exactly. You are different. You are. You know. Almost like your life experience. I think one of the things I take from and again I come in with a little bit of baggage having read other stories. It's like it almost sort of feels like he's saying your life experience, the stuff that Conan has mentioned, like to Prospero, makes you more valuable because you do know these other lands, you do know these other people, you've lived this life, you come with experience that like the nobility don't. Like they come kind of packaged as
Yeah.
is.
And
Um,
nothing's going to change because they've learned from a previous royal, from a
mm,
previous king or queen or whatever it is. So there's no variety there.
yeah,
Whereas he comes in and he's like, well, why do I do, again, we're kind of guessing, but he's probably looking at you, well, why do you do it that way? That's not right. You should try doing this. So again, it's another set of eyes
mm,
to kind of tweak it to make it work better for everybody involved, not just for the fat greedy cats.
yeah, exactly. And I think that sort of kind of Prospero's kind of told him that, and he hasn't sort of been able to listen. But then this guy, this because we should say this guy, this epi, if you want to call him, isn't just some random person. Like he is a known figure within Aquilonian history, and he's been dead for like 1,500 years. And so it's kind of like this famous and established figure from your kingdom's history coming forward and saying, firstly, I'm not really dead. I'm just trapped in this sort of netherworld. But actually, no, I see you. I can see the past, the present, and the future, and I see you being incredibly important. Gives him that kind of reassurance, and as you say, sort of that you're important because you carry these traits, you carry this baggage with you, which is cool. Um,
It it's because I might ruin it for people here, but it's funny when he meets him, it's a bit like Billy Baxter meet in Shazam,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and
yeah.
that it's that kind of, you know, I'm old, I can't do this anymore. You take the staff, you take the reins now. Here, Conan, you take the sword, and you go do, but I can't do anymore. And that it's it is. It, I mean, Conan in a way, he's a bit like a superhero. He's this kind of, he's the hero of the story,
Mm.
and this this whether it's a dream or whatever it is, it's come and said, look, you need to stay alive. You've got a snake amongst you, and that they're going to come for you. I'm going to try and give you some power to kind of protect you from this. Pretty sure he didn't expect what will coming next.
Yeah, I actually say there's a line. I was just looking at that because I was going to say I love the fact that like they have this conversation that makes him feel better and stuff, and then um Conan gets annoyed with him because he starts saying something. He says, "You speak in riddles," which is I love the fact that like Conan's like, "Just speak plainly to me. Like I don't want you to mess around." Um, and Conan says, "Let me see my foe, and I'll cleave his skull to the teeth," which is a great line. And Epimetheus says to him, like, "Loose your barbarian fury against your foes of flesh and blood. It is not against them, not against men. I must shield you." And so you know exactly what you're saying. Like, he's like, "No, no, do whatever you want against. Like, there are people coming for you, but you do you.
You can do
Yeah,
that.
you do you. But I've got to give you something extra." And he does. He basically takes him in this hallucination or in this dream. He takes the sword that Conan is holding, and he etches into it using magic a symbol of a phoenix into this sword. And then basically sort of they talk a bit more, and then Conan wakes up. And he's like, "What a bloody strange dream. Crazy that was." And then he looks down at his sword that is next to him, and the phoenix symbol is still, or is there now on his sword. And seeing that it's appeared, he realizes that, like, oh, this might be real. People are coming to kill me. So he
Better get
jumps,
ready.
so better get ready. So he jumps out and starts armoring up, which is, again, I love that it's sort of like, but he doesn't do it in time. They basically sort of it go then cuts to Asante, and he's sort of and his guys sort of like sneaking in, and we find out that he's paid off a guards at the head of the guards and some of the bits and pieces. But when they get to Conan's quarters, his sort of bedroom, and they kick it in, and they're expecting to find him asleep, and they're like, easy pickings. He should be, bewildered because we've broken in. Conan stood there waiting for them with his axe and his sword, and like not fully armored up because he ran out of time, but he's like, "Bring it on!" And that's when you're like, "Oh, this guy is a badass."
Yeah, I think that's the point I got in the book, and I'm like, I mean, we were saying about before we started recording about Wolverine, Deadpool Wolverine.
Mm.
It's that line, "Let's fucking go,"
Yeah,
and it's like, eh, eh, I mean, the bit when they kind of made a big point of there's 20 of them there, and I was just reading that line thinking, you've not got enough.
yeah, yeah.
And even some of I
Mm.
mean, the two well armored friends of his,
Mm.
you're still thinking, maybe you'll put up a bit of a fight, and is he Grom? No, Gorham, I think he's called.
Yeah,
Who goes in through the door first, and Conan just takes him out with a swing
yeah,
of. I mean, he breaks the sword, and then he looks down and he sees the helmets come off in the face, and he's like, "Go on, like one of my friends. How could you betray me?" And then everybody else is just pounding, and he's just taking names, and you're just
mm.
thinking, oh, and I mean, I started reading that bit, and I could have. This is the thing, I couldn't put the book down at that point. It's like I've got to keep reading. I've got to keep reading. I've got to see what kind of goes from this, and you know, it may be about 5 or 10 minutes of reading, but all that happens in probably like 30 seconds to a minute.
Oh, yeah.
And it's scary how fast that all goes.
It's about 8 pages, but it's like it's some of the details in there are amazing. And like I say, it can't be taken that long. You talk about Grommel, as he goes in and he gets done over. And Asante says so he calls his name. His eyes blazing in amazement as the shattered helmet disclosed the shattered head. And he was like, "That's amazing." Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff going like that, and then it's basically sort of Conan cleaving people with his axe, like killing them with their own daggers,
Yeah.
and
I
and
mean,
just sweeping through them.
I think at that point, I think he drops the sword hilt and he just it says he goes to the wall where he takes the axe, which has hung there for like half a century, and then just takes it and it's like, right, I know he's good with a sword. He's now got a double axe.
Yeah.
You guys are, and I think he cleaves the next guy's his sides in, and that again he realizes it's someone else and that, and people are still coming in they're stabbing him. That they are getting marks on him
Mm,
and that. But I think there's a point where he's panting. He's got the axe in one hand and he's kind of wiping the blood across his face out of his eyes,
yeah.
and he's still ready to go. And someone mistakenly, oh, I think he swings the axe down and it gets stuck in the ground. And one of them
Yes.
thinks opportunity, and he just pulls it back up and just takes him off.
Yeah. It almost like by accident. Like, as he yanks it out of the ground, he ends up
Yeah,
taking him out. Um, but there is one point you made a point before about Ronaldo, which is weird to see in a book from the 30s. But um, he is the bard. He is the sort of like this sort of singer and stuff and poet and that. And towards the end of the fight, he runs and lurches and lunges at Conan as well. Sort of like it says, "Die, tyrant." Um, and as he does so, Conan sort of goes for the swing and sort of, as you said, holds off because he's like, "Oh no, this guy, his songs and his thing used to sort of touch my heart, and he has that connection with him." Bad mistake because he sort of like it gives Ronaldo an open to actually or
I
cut
think that's
Conan's
because
side.
he's when he's talking previously with Prosper, um, this they said you should have hung him, you should have made him
Mm,
dance, and he's like, no, because his words and his songs will outlive me, and
mm,
that, and they will remember the songs and they will remember what he wrote, whereas I will be forgotten, which
yeah,
which is true because I mean, this book, Robbie Howard's passed away now, but this book is still here. These words are
exactly.
still here. The stories still keep going on, even if you pass away. And I think that's that thing when he comes at him, he's like, there must be something there. There must have been something that soured Ronaldo's thought to Conan, but there must have been a kind of maybe not a friendship, but an understanding at some
A
point for Conan.
respect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for Conan to go, hang on a minute, you're more important than what these other people are. I'm going to give
Mm.
you a chance.
Yeah, and it obviously doesn't pay off because he
No.
stabs him in the side, but he then ends up, you say sort of killing everyone off. But this is where it sort of it escalates further. So he's been as Epi has been telling him, you've been able to loose your rage, your barbarian fury on your flesh and blood enemies against these assassins. But amongst them is a guy called Thoth Amon, and again, that's a very sort of Lovecraftian name, and it's kind of thing that I think Howard will go forward with. Like, his main name is with Thulsa Doom as well, and
Hmm.
who was played by the late great now James Earl Jones in the '82 film. Um, we now have this Thoth Amon who was a great like necromancer and sorcerer at some point and lost his this jewel,
The
this
serpent
band,
ring.
the serpent thing, yeah. And for many years he lost it and he's ended up being in the service of Asante as sort of like a just a servant really, nothing special. But then finds out that as he's describing this thing, and he gives his history. It's a great sort of like coincidence. Fate is acting in this kind of thing. He says, "Oh, yes, I had this person, and they stole it from me, and it got sold off, and da da." And then Santa's like, "Really?" And there's it Dion. I can't remember one. Yeah, so yeah, it's
It's
Dion.
King Dion.
Yeah, King Dion says, "Really? That reminds me, I have something very similar."
Look at this.
Yeah.
And, and reading that bit, you can just imagine that the excitement and the euphoria of Thoth at that point when he probably sees a ring, and
Mm.
it's like you know Gollum and that bit
Yes.
where it's like, oh, the excitement. And there was plans for King. I mean, there was going to kill King Dion off anyway
Yeah.
at some point, but there was plans for him. But Bob just takes a dagger and just takes him out there and then.
Yeah.
And at which point he then takes a ring and he creates something at that point, doesn't he?
Mm. Well,
The
it releases a demon of some kind, like
yeah,
a
some
black,
baboon type.
yeah, some entity with claws and fangs and all this other stuff that, funnily enough, kills Ronaldo to get
Yeah.
past him to get to Conan.
Well, I think it goes Atalanta. It's Atalanta that's coming
Pinned.
towards Conan,
Yeah,
and I think he was going to run him through, and the demon comes behind and just bites him in the middle of the shoulders and then just takes him out.
that's right. Yeah, it takes him out. And this is the thing that Epimetheus has been warned Conan about because his sword, the symbol on it glows, and he just manages because the sword's broken, so it's a shard of a sword now. But he manages to stab the demon, and it kills it, and it turns into like a mist smoke and disappears off. Um, and Conan's basically left there, like with all these dead people around him, axe and everything dripping blood.
And the guard
Um,
turn up.
and the guards all turn up. Yeah. And it's clearly like it's kind of suggested that nobody like believes him. He's sort of like, this is this thing attacked me, and everyone's like, oh,
I
okay,
mean, there will have been witnesses because I
yeah,
mean they won't come forward, but some of the assassins did back out. They saw this
they
appear
run. Yeah,
and they
yeah,
run. So,
yeah,
but you're not going to get any of them coming forward going, "Yeah, I saw that. I'll back him up."
yeah. Which the fact that they sort of the final line, I was to say not final line, but the final paragraph, because they have sort of said, um, um, they basically sort of acknowledge because they see the symbol on the sword. That's the first thing they see the symbol. Of, oh, that's Epimetheus. That's they know that thing. But then they recognize that there on the floor where the monster had died, there lay, like a terrible shadow, a broad dark stain that could not be washed out. The thing had left its outline clearly etched in its blood, and the outline was of no being of a sane or normal world. So, like, and a great, it's almost that thing of undescribable terror that Lovecraft
Hmm.
writes about. It's like, it's like it's not of a sane and normal world. Then what is it? Like, give me some description. But I'd like those kinds of things. But it's cool.
But at that point, you're then hooked in, and then you're
Mm,
like, "Where did it come from? What is this? What? Give me more of his stories because I want to know more about this." You know,
yeah,
I mean, there's horrors there. It's not just, it is the sword and sorcery, and that
yeah,
we've seen a lot of the sword. There is obviously a sorcery side to it, and that's one of the good things you can play with because whatever you write and whatever you do, you can't be wrong, to be fair, because it's your imagination that's writing it, or it's our imagination processing it. And, you know, I'm sure the beast that's in your head is different to the beast that's in my head, but it's still kind of that scary, black thing that's going
mm,
towards them. And that's so it's a great way of it gives you a bit of detail there, but I think it's good that it's a bit kind of vague
yes.
because it gives you more time to kind of process and build that picture up yourself.
Yeah, well, one of the things I agree, like, yeah, you can build it in your own head. Like, what the hell was this thing? As you described, like a baboon or a demon or whatever this thing is, like, it can be anything and everything. It's just this thing that came at him. But the other thing I kind of like is about this element because they do this in some of the other stories I've read is the people that are involved in the story haven't got a clue what it is either. So
Yeah,
there's no one
which
there to provide an explanation. They're just like, we just saw this like crazy shit. Like I've got no clue what that was. So um
which again, considering it's a fantasy book, it's also believable that because like if I turn around and say, oh yes, this big black demon came through, you'd be like, oh yeah, of course it did, you know.
yeah,
But
exactly.
no, it did. I can't really describe it to you because I've never seen anything like this before, and that's the thing, it leaves it also leaves people with doubt in the brain of what actually happened. Yeah, there is a stain on the floor, so there is something, and obviously the symbol,
Yeah.
because I think the high priest does say what you described, the corridor and the thing, you shouldn't know that. That is
Yes,
house to
that's secret information to our
yeah.
priesthood any only. Yeah, yeah,
And he's like, which then gives Conan that bit more kind of, he is telling the truth, but he wouldn't know this any other way. I mean,
mm,
the symbol on the sword is enough, but knowing this more of this information adds to his story to make you think, yeah, he is telling the truth here.
yeah. Well, weirdly, I think the out it's not said, but it's kind of alluded to is you start the story with people setting out to kill Conan. That's the sort of, you get these sort of the villains or the assassins or whatever, the conspirators. And then you have Prospero sort of saying, like, no, no, you're doing okay. And then you have Epimetheus saying, like, no, your future is tied into that of Aquilonia. The events of this story at the end of it, when people come in and see the events and everything else, and then you see that, like, he's stood there dripping in blood. So people, again, it reestablishes his legend as a badass. So everyone's like, King Conan still got it. Like, the dude
But
did this stuff. But more than that, the priesthood is now saying, oh, hang on, one of the figures of our, like, spiritual history of our kingdom has almost anointed Conan as being
mm,
important to our future. So this kind of legitimizes him. This event, as it set out to kill him, kind of legitimizes him as the king of Aquilonia for some kind. So it's interesting how it kind of not only is it backfiring that they don't kill him, they kind of set him up to be the
yeah, it
figurehead
kind of
for the
makes
state.
him more of a legend. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, even the bit when they go, quick, bandage him, and he goes, wine. It's like,
Yes, they think he's
yeah, yeah.
dying, don't they? And he's like, yeah,
You,
yeah,
you're dying, you've got cuts, you're mangled up, and you just, you've just had this weird thing biting your arm, and you're just asking for wine, and you're thinking, yeah, he's fine, he's all
yeah.
right.
Yeah, everyone backs off. He's fine. Don't worry about it. It's not all his blood. It'll be okay.
Yeah, yeah. Is that your blood? Not all of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
But
Go on.
again, that's where you kind of come, and that is Conan. That is Conan in a nutshell.
Yes.
And that's kind of a perfect way to kind of finish it with him. That kind of, you've just seen some shit, mate. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna drink. I'm gonna move
Yeah.
on about things and probably look for the next battle. And that's been his life. We said at the start that that's what he's been lacking. So if anything, this has been his highlight of the year because he's probably been craving for something like this. He's probably hoping that, you know, next Tuesday is the same. And
Yes. Yeah. Same time next week, everybody.
yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. No, it's interesting how it's sort of like, there are. I had a little Google earlier on, and I was looking, and there are several sort of like they break the Conan stories up, and I think it's like there are three or four that they refer to as like the King Conan stories. Um, and so yeah, I'd be interested to read more of those and be like, okay, well, where do they follow on from?
Yeah.
Um,
Because it's like I said at the start, it wasn't the story I expected.
mm,
And as I started it, it was a struggle. But at the end of it, I loved it.
yeah, yeah,
And that I really enjoyed it. I can see where, you know, other media has taken from this. And that, even like, like I say with D&D and things like that, you can see where this has all been pulled from, that they've taken parts of this. And again, the story and the setup of this really does work.
mm,
Once you've read it, you can kind of go back and think, that makes sense now. I get what you were doing. I didn't at
yeah,
first. I kind of doubted you, but now I know that the next book I read, I'm gonna trust you because
yes,
I know that I know what your writing style kind of is now.
and it's going
You
to
know, so,
pay off.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you're right, and it's you said before, like it pays off. It all comes around at the end. But the question I've got for you then, out the back of this, that story paid off, and you got the Conan that you wanted in that sort of final third. Are you now interested then? Would you read more Conan stories, knowing that they're kind of different to the film? But like, would you be interested in listening to or reading more Conan stories?
Well, yeah, I've bought the books, so yeah. But
Yeah.
even even if I hadn't, yes, because I mean it's funny because I've been reading comics and other bits and bobs and that, but many years ago, and that when I used to work with my dad and we used to drive around a lot, I used to read a bit there in car and that,
Mm.
and I used to read a few of the Warhammer books, and I've gone back out and I've found the Black Arts and that.
Oh yeah.
So I've started to go back and read this again. Um, it's a bit of a book. It's several books put together. But there's also the Conrad saga. So the old fantasy books that I used to read, I've now dug out, and I want to go back and read them again because it's just given me that kind of that oomph. You
Mm.
know, as I said, one of the good things about these stories is you can go away from daily life, to a fantasy world. That's one of the reasons why I play D&D. I can get away from mundane work and things like that and just go off somewhere else and just let my brain kind of go. I don't
Yeah.
have to worry about anything. I can just enjoy this and that. So it's nice to have that, and it's nice that, you know, you suggested this, and it's like, yeah, I want to go and I want to read more. I want to see what else he goes, and I trust his writing now.
Mm.
I trust that even if I might think this first couple of chapters, what you're trying to tell me,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think it'll probably be an easier read knowing how, every writer's got its own style.
Mm.
Some ramble, Stephen King and things like that. They ramble on, and you think, come on, just like you say, you know, that chapter was a bit pointless there. You didn't really tell me anything there. And then, I mean, this first book's only 29 pages. It's
Yeah.
not a big book. And although it felt like a slog at first, once you get past the first two chapters, it goes, and it
Mm.
goes really fast. And you don't realize how quick it's actually. And then you get to the end, and that kind of the wrap up thing does kind of, but there's not a great deal for them to do. They're just kind of concreting what actually has happened here. But it was that thing of, as I say, I was reading, and it's hard sometimes when you're picking up point down because you've got kids and other bits and bobs. But that bit when the battle started, I thought, right, okay, I know what's coming now. As soon as it kind of they busted in through the door and Conan was stood there, I thought, right, and I'm like, I am going to be busy for the next half an hour.
Yeah.
I'm reading, leave me alone. And off I went and I read it, and it was just and it just went by so fast,
Mm.
and it it's good that when you get books like that, that you kind of think, right, I'm in for this. I'm in
Yeah.
for this. This has pulled me in, and I want to kind of go with you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Is that along for the ride? We were saying this
Yeah,
again off air before we talk about films and that take you on the ride. Like you're just there to enjoy it, or you're there to experience it. And I feel like Howard sort of does that. And I will say, like, he was doing bits and pieces. This isn't the only character he invented or he created. He invented Cull as well, which is other sort of like barbarian, who claim he exists in the same era, in the same world, but in an earlier era. So Cull becomes before Conan, I believe, and then he's done other things as well. A lot of cowboy books as well, but um one of the things with this is, as you say, the way it's written, it's very pulpy when you sort of really get into it, and it is kind of like you just sort of. I found myself exactly like yourself, like it's kind of a slog to get through this, the machinations that's going on at the beginning and the conversation. But then once, to be fair, from the moment you have the hallucination or the dream, and I was like, oh, that's the bit like it's weird and it's interesting, it's kind of it's kind of entices me, and then it just like you say, from that point on, I was like bang, and it's just the
mm.
story just rocks through and I really enjoyed it. And I get to the end, and you sort of like, I'm much like Conan, where I'm just sort of like, oh, what more? Like I can see why, like when's the next issue coming out? When's the next book coming out? Kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah. And you think about it, so this is 1930s when he's writing this, so the stuff we know now, we've got, like we said, we've got a lot of baggage. We know a lot more things. Back then, it'd been few and far between kind of what I knew, and the the ability to, like you said earlier, you can go Google something and find it out. It's not simple for him to do things like that. So
No.
this story's all come from him. Obviously there'll be Robin Hood and things like that that is taken from, but he's not got a lot of references to go from
Mm.
and that. And then you look at it and think, well, look at all the things that has come from this.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, I- do you think he ever expected that this first little story or these first set of books would explode into what we have nowadays? And all these other different kind of writers who have taken, aspirations from this guy of like,
Mm.
oh, we can we can pluck things from there because that works and people love that.
Well, I think like Conan becomes like the quintessential barbarian character, doesn't it? Like he is that figure, not
Yeah.
just the Arnie version, but like
Oh,
quintessential sort of like design.
you've got the comics, you've got
Yeah.
these books, you've got the video game, the
Mm.
films, Red Sonja. There's so much out there because even Terry Pratchett did a version of his own, because it works. People, I mean, the Terry Pratchett one is an interesting one because he's a very old man.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's
I
got
like
knackered
it.
knees.
Yeah. But again, like, it's a reference point. It's a pop culture sort of like reference point. People know. Like Conan
Yeah.
is a part of the zeitgeist and has been for decades. And I think you're right. I think, I don't think Howard knew. I think he was just, he wanted to, but I don't know he knew. He didn't even, unfortunately, he never got to see it reach those heights. But yeah, I just want to put in, I've just been sort of check something. So this obviously was published in Weird Tales in 32. And Robert E. Howard had a relationship with Weird Tales. He'd already provided previous stories for other characters and just some weird fiction. So much a bit like, Lovecraft. One of the ones that's in this book, it's in the book, it'll be in a collection he got because it got refined, but this is from the editor, Farnworth Wright. He says, I'm returning the Frost Giant's daughter in a separate envelope, as I do not much care for it. That he did redo, and it came out later. But the Phoenix and the Sword has points of real excellence. I hope you will see your way clear to touch it up and rebuild it. It is the first two chapters that do not click.
So
Uh,
even back then,
Yeah, it's the next sentence that's really funny. The story opens rather uninterestingly, it seems to me, and the reader has difficulty in orientating himself. The first chapter ends well, and the second chapter begins superbly, but after King Conan's personality is a well established, the chapter saga from the chapter saga from too much writing. There you go. Suffers from too much writing. So
which
again, it's saying exactly the same as we're saying. The first two chapters are a bit of a slog. There's kind of overwriting going on. Even the editor in 1932 was going, you kind of want to cut some of this.
having said that, I think for all we criticize it, I think it actually opens up right. I think the issue is if this is the first book,
Yes.
that's where the issue is.
Yeah.
If you know Conan, it works.
Oh, yes.
If you don't know Conan, that's where the problem
Kind of a
is,
struggle. Yeah.
and that. But at the same point, the setup, seeing that they are plotting against him before, because I mean, chapter one's the setup kind of there. Then chapter two, we meet Conan. Then chapter three, I think, is with Thorpe and King
Mm-hmm.
Dion,
Mm-hmm.
and that. But at the same point, you need that because
Yeah.
you need to set up the people. If it just starts and it's like Conan, it's not compelling to see Conan. He's a king who used to be a barbarian on the throne,
Yeah.
redoing his maps. Oh,
You
that
kind
can
of
be
need
just
to.
as boring
Yeah.
as kind of the setup of a plot to kill the king.
Exactly. I think one of the things is we have the benefit of coming in with the Conan baggage. I mean, I've read other stories in this within this tome that I have, and I've come to this. So I'm like, oh, I've already read some of his adventures. So I'm kind of like, cool, I know the Conan I'm going to get at some point, and this is interesting to see him as an older man, an older person dealing with these things. So I'm fine. But you're right. If this is the first time you're being introduced to a character where they're like, he's done this thing, you're not going to see him conquering this land. We're just going to talk about the aftermath. Like, it's kind of brave in a way, kind of ballsy as an opening gambit for a character. But yeah, I would definitely say my advice, much like I googled, do not come to this first. It might have been the first published, but it's not the first Conan story to read. There are much better ones. Red Nails is where I started, and that's an excellent story. Um,
Yeah, again, maybe it was that thing of he had a character, he had some other characters that he was interested in, and he wanted to see whether, I'm assuming he'll have read the reviews from him, and people will have said, I want to know more about Ronaldo, I want to know more about these characters. And he can go, right, okay, a bit like Zack Snyder when he redid,
mm,
Justice League. I still think he listened to the fans, and then the problem is he then tried to put a thing in there and it didn't work. But maybe that's what Robert E. Howard kind of did, was he listened to see, all right, so they want to know more about, this romance between Conan and Prospero. They want to know about Ronaldo. They want to know about Bob. They
yeah,
want to, I'll write more about that. I'll give them more. I'll build that into a story, and then kind of these guys have crossed paths before. You know, it's kind of a, let's throw everything out and see what sticks.
yeah, a little bit, isn't it? Yeah. Um, so I mean, I'll be interested to see, reconvening at some point and sort of go, I've read another one that's different and see how
Mm.
you think of that, and we'll see. But yeah, let's wrap up on that. So let's give it a lot of fun of it. So you enjoyed this story, and you will read more Conan,
Yeah,
which I think is which is great. I think everyone should read Conan. Maybe not everyone. This maybe there are certain people that might be upset by certain things, but it's cool and it's great. Very pulpy for its time. I love it.
I did mention it to one of my friends when we were doing other week when we were playing D&D, and I says to Lee, I says, "Oh, I've just started reading Conan Phoenix on the Sword," and he's like, "Oh," he says, "that series you're gonna love." He says, "There's some ropey ones in there." He
Mm-hmm.
says, "I think the person that you're reading is a bit so-so," but he
Yeah,
says, "You're gonna enjoy them." He says, just stick with it." He says, "And there's some really good stories there." He says that, I mean, Lee's a little bit older than me, but he says, yeah, that they were the stuff that he read when he was young. He says,
yeah,
you know, the stories there in there, the films, can't get anywhere near with what you're gonna read. And that he says, the writing there, the guy that, he was saying the guy that did it, he says, shouldn't have been able to do stories like that, and he just did it so well. It compels you, and he remembers being a kid reading these, thinking, "That's what I want to be." And end of the day, that's what Robert E. Howard aimed to do.
mm.
He wanted people to read it and go, "That's what I want.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want
No, we
more of
did.
this."
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's a compelling is a great word. Is a really good word for this. I
Yeah.
think compelling is where you're at. Excellent. Right. Well, we should sort of wrap it up there. Any final thoughts then on Conan?
I mean, we've spoiled this book, like, but
Yes.
go read them, because yeah, as I say, I'm looking forward to getting into the next. And
Yeah.
I don't remember what the next one is in the chapter,
Well,
but
let's have a
yeah,
look.
see,
I've got them all here. Let me check the index of my mighty tome. So if you read them in order, you got the Scarlet Citadel
yeah, that's the next one.
is the next one, and then the Tower and the Elephant, which is the one I did uh on the last episode. And they flit around, so they're sort of young Conan, prime Conan, King Conan, sort
Yeah,
of.
which will be interesting. I don't know what I'm going to get next. Am I
Yeah,
going to get an older one, which will be kind of exciting as you go through and read these, because you are going to get to the next book and think, which one am I going to get now?
yeah.
Am I going to
Which
get the one
part?
who's the raw one, or am I going to get the older, more wise one, or where's it going to go? But yeah, as I say, I mean, and again, most of them are only about 30, 40 pages long, so it's not like a big slog to read through.
Mm.
and
And
that.
they often do sort of belt through, but yeah, no, they are really good fun. Anyway, we shall wrap up there for now. But Math, thank you very much for coming on to talk Conan. It's exciting stuff. And where can people find you, and what are you up to at the moment?
Comics in Motion. I doing a we do a I think monthly uh Clone Wars conversations with Mike Burton and Dave Horrocks, where I've never seen the Clone Wars, so we're going through there. We kind of break down. We do like so many episodes at a time. Um, as I said, I've not watched them before, and that it kind of elevates some of the films. Actually, seeing certain things. Uh, some of the best episodes are the ones where it's just for clones, no force
Yeah,
powers, things like that. I love it. So I've got that. I'm going to be recording on Monday actually with Jax because he's doing his next stage of the Back to the Filmography with all right,
yeah.
Matthew McConaughey.
Oh,
So
what are you starting with? What film are you doing?
I'm doing Angels in the Outfield,
Oh, oh,
and
wicked.
which I think I have seen before, and that I was. It's funny because I was going to watch it a few weeks ago
Mm.
because it's on Disney, and then I looked last week and it's gone off Disney. It's typical, and that. But yeah, I think I've seen it before. But yeah, I'm going to be doing that, and then there's something else further down the line. But yeah, and then with yourself and that. So yeah,
Yeah, more
just pop up
Conan.
now and again.
That's it, yeah, pop up. It's good. That's it. Do the variety, the spice of life. That's what you want to be doing. Now it's exciting stuff. Yeah, do go check out. I said all those different things from Comics in Motion. The variety on there is excellent. Sort of the amount I struggle to keep up, so I often like dip in when I'm like, oh
Can't
yeah, that's
listen to
good.
everything, but
No,
it's good when you cherry pick and you think, oh,
that's yeah,
that that's something I'm interested in. That's something I'll listen to.
yeah. And there's so much good stuff on there, and so many great people as well. So it is well worth checking out. Comics in Motion. Go check all this out. Anyway, for now, yeah, if you like what we're doing, leave a review. Go check out your podcast catcher and leave all kinds of anything on there. Preferably 5 stars and nice things would be, what I want. And also check out our Patreon. We've got a whole things going on over there. I do 30-minute thoughts. Julian Darius and I have gone through the entire Twilight Zone, the original sort of Rod Serling years. And also, we're doing side material now for Stories Out of Time and Space. And we're going to be doing soon the Alien franchise. We've done the Alien franchise for the main feed, and we're now doing the shorts, and we're reviewing the games and some other stuff in there. The Apocalypse thing carries on as well. So we've got loads of stuff in there. Go check it out. Links down below. But for now, Math, thank you very much for joining me on this, and more Conan for the future, I think. But for now, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you on the next episode.